something. This entire book is all tell no show, except to show off the author's knowledge of designer labels, characters. Most boring, empty-headed, vile, and entitled people ever written about. I have never, for example, seen an author brag about their upbringing in the footnotes of their novel. Popping in here to say that I did a part 1 to this video that I really recommend you watch before you watch this, where I talked through the 3 techniques that Kevin Kwan uses that I think make Crazy Rich Asians a very, very special book, a very, very special series, very specific techniques too, with lots of examples. And so in this video, I'm going to be reacting to Goodreads reviews and trying to figure out if I was right or not on what I said. So for it to make sense, I really suggest watching the other video. This is just a bonus because reading these Goodreads reviews was a time. So, okay, thank you so much for watching. Let's get into it. This is some seriously trashy cracklet, and no, that's not a typo. This book is as addictive and dramatic and ridiculous as you surely imagine it to be. Yeah, it's it's ridiculous, dramatic, and it's wonderful. I love it. You'll wonder why you're actively murdering your brain cells. I would argue that reading this is not as actively murdering your brain cells as watching Netflix shows. Come on. I don't like this review. I don't know why I liked it. Maybe I'm nosy, maybe I'm superficial. What? I think that calling stuff chicklet and stuff like that is so demeaning. I love romantic comedies. Like, I think they're funny. That's the point. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be escapism and lighthearted. Hush up. I think another Goodreads reviewer said it best. Shallow characters don't mean shallowly written characters. The author didn't pick up on that memo. Okay, the characters in Crazy Rich Asians are so two-dimensional and flat, you just don't care about them. A pet peeve of mine is when a writer tells me something rather than shows me something. This entire book is all tell no show, except to show off the author's knowledge of designer labels. Slow clap. Yeah, the author does know a lot of designer labels. I don't know if I'd agree with that. I do think that the characters, I mean, they could be further developed. Maybe because I've read the whole series, I do feel like they become more three-dimensional as we go. Like, we do learn, like, for me, when I think of three-dimensional characters, I think of the first dimension being how they show themselves, the second dimension being kind of like their backstory, their motivation, and then the third dimension being their actions when it counts. And I do think we get at least some of that second dimension stuff. Like, we get some of the second dimension stuff for Eddie, we get some of the second dimension stuff for Eleanor, for Suyi, for the Ama. I don't think they're one-dimensional, and I guess there's a lot of tell, but at the same time, to me, telling is being like, you know, Eddie is a spoiled brat, but he actually does show that in a very humorous way. I don't agree with that. Fun read. Did not love the writing style of this novel. The syntax was fairly weak and the voice of the individual character was not strong. That is true. So when you're writing an omniscient, the idea is that when you go into different perspectives, you actually should not have strong individual character voices because that can really mess with the reader. So he does that when he goes into italics, but when he's just describing people's thoughts, he really doesn't go into their individual voices, and that's actually part of the omniscient technique. Okay, this person gave it 1 star. Actually, half a star, but I gave it a bonus half star for a couple of readings. Writing, awful. Storyline, started off fair and ended up ridiculous. That's the point, love. Dialogue, some of the worst I've ever read. I like the dialogue. Characters, most boring, empty-headed, vile, and entitled people ever written about. Oh, fuck, I love that. The writer has some talent in writing interesting and lush descriptions of exotic locales, architecture, fashion, cuisine, and luxury goods. It was enough to keep me reading. Secondly, it was fascinating from a socio-cultural perspective, even though I cannot attest to the accuracy. Yes! Crazy Rich Asians was like seeing a fashionable fat drunk woman fall down, and you know you shouldn't keep looking, but you just can't help yourself. Okay. That's really funny, actually. No, it's fascinating from the socio-cultural perspective. Exactly. That's why people read this book. That is the cool thing about the book. I know I'm searching review text now. I'm gonna look up footnotes. This person says, interesting and fun setting, described by an author who obviously knows his subject. That's the end of my positives. The author's knowledge of his subject is made clear when he starts putting his personal experiences in the chapter footnotes. which also act as a lazy way to use native language. Then there's the method of storytelling through chapter POV. This works when an author truly stays in one character's head for the entire chapter, and 2 chapter POVs are needed for the story, and not just because the author had a scene he couldn't bring himself. Okay, I think the majority of these reviews just don't understand what omniscient is. I think a lot of people reading romantic comedies just don't recognize the style of writing before, and because it's new to them, because they are not familiar with this perspective, they're like, what is going on? And they're saying it's negatives, but it's actually quite good. So they didn't like the footnotes. I freaking loved the footnotes. The language is authentic, which required some footnotes the author graciously provided. Yes, I love that they put in that. Totally agree. This person liked the footnotes, liked the differences in generations. Beautiful. The first thing you'll notice is that Crazy Rich Asians is all the way over the top. That's what we picked up the novel for, a fun, feisty read that can be enjoyed simply for the setting and the hilarity of it. This book was soaked in Asian culture. They loved from the Hokkien and Mandarin slang littered throughout the pages. Thanks, Kwan, for the footnotes. Yes! I love that. Okay, this person says way too many POVs. Again, I strongly disagree with that. Also, the author's knowledge of his subject is made clear when he starts putting his personal experiences in the chapter footnotes, which, okay, this person did not like the footnotes. I did. I'm not a huge fan of footnotes, but since I am not of Asian descent, I found them necessary to keep up. This person says the movie is better than the book. I think the movie's just more what you're used to. Loved all the footnotes that are obviously targeted at Westerners who have no or very little idea of Singapore Chinese culture, explaining all the cultural references. That was definitely something I wasn't expecting from this book, and I ended up learning a lot. Yes! I learned a lot too. Agreed. Amazing. This was a very entertaining notes. I loved the footnotes. Yay! Because it describes all the foul language. It's so funny. And it does poke fun at things. But he makes an attempt to paint a picture of Singaporean history and the people with a bit of humanity. This is without a doubt one of the worst books I've ever read. I regret spending my money on it. Trying to critique it concisely is like trying to explain in 100 words why Trump is a bad leader. I have never, for example, seen an author brag about their upbringing in the footnotes of their novel. He is with a worse grip on how people interact or how women act. If I had to read the Harvard-educated NYU professor giggle one more time, I would have pitched the book into the ocean. I'm sorry. Dude. Educated people can freaking giggle. What? Educated people giggle. I'm gonna make a public service announcement like that. Educated people can giggle. He's trying to write with more of a message. He wants to tell us about the consequences of extreme wealth. No, he's not. He's not trying to tell us about the consequences of extreme wealth. I really disagree with that. He's not. That is not the purpose of the thing. She thinks there's an analogy. No, I honestly don't think he's talking about the consequences of extreme wealth at all. I think he's just trying to paint an honest picture of this world, and I don't think he has a particular message as to whether wealth is good or bad. Okay. So I think overall, all the Goodreads reviews basically agree. It's a super fun read. It's super over the top. It's kind of dramatic. A lot of people don't seem to like the omniscient. They think that it's being done incorrectly. I think it's honestly just because they're not familiar with omniscient, especially not in this genre. And there's mixed reviews on the footnotes. Okay, I'll take it. But everyone agreed with technique number 3 that he is awesome at describing the luxuries. So there we go. So I would maybe give me 1.5 out of 3 for pinpointing the things that people liked. Although I think the people who liked it were the same people who liked the footnotes and liked the POV. It's really interesting. This is fun to read Goodreads reviews. Ooh. All right. Well, if you're not subscribed to my channel, think about doing that. I really appreciate it. It really helps me. I'm trying to get to 1,000 at some point in time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.